a fun Halloween memory. Boo Berry cereal. I saw this. It came up on my Target. Cereal choices. I was looking for some ingredients in the Post cereal, and all the cereals came up, and this was one of them. All the cereal pieces are B's. The letter B. I guess those are bats and blueberries. Marshmallow. Total sugar. So we'll see. My dad was such the anti-cereal enthusiast for us kids when, back in the 60s and 70s when we were going to school. He was so upset at the amount of sugar that we were getting at the start of our day. %, sugar. Looking for it to say gluten-free because it's made from corn. Corn, green corn, cornmeal, and sugar. Sugar's the third ingredient. Remember you used to get like little toys in your cereal boxes when you were growing up? Do they still do that anymore? I think it just tastes like any other cereal, really. my dad, he would be so upset. He'd see us eat our cereal, and we'd leave a ton of milk in the bowl. He wouldn't let us leave the table till we drank all the milk out of the bowl. Anyways, I remember so many days arguing with my brother and sister at the breakfast table over the back of the cereal box, but this is kind of boring. It just says enter for chance to win Monsters prize. Go to the website. I don't know. But here are the other like spooky cereals. So I also have this Halloween question. My daughter had got this book a year or two ago, and she got one for her grandma, but she also wanted one for me, so she got a second one. She couldn't find the same book for Mom. So she said, Mom, tell me your memories. And then on October 31st, what were your Halloween traditions as a child? And what were your Halloween traditions when you were too old to do trick-or-treating? And do you have a special, memorable Halloween to tell us about? And what was your best costume ever? So that's kind of cool. They have, do you have a haunted house story? Did you ever tell ghost stories or experience what you thought was a ghost or a spooky story? And do you have a haunted house to relate to those stories? So they got 1, 2, 3, like 4, 5 like questions about Halloween. And the traditions as a child, it's not that we had traditions. I think we just did what everybody else did with, the big things of candy, and trick-or-treaters would come to the door and we'd go out trick-or-treating. But as a child, like this, I remember this so vividly, and it was so confusing. I couldn't figure out how a parent or a family would think that this would be a fun trick-or-treat goodie for kids. And a lot of houses would put a penny in your bag. So at the end of the night, you'd have 4 or 5, maybe 6 pennies. And the other one was caramel apples. Is that what they're called? Caramel apples. Those apples on a stick. Candied apples. Yeah, candied apples. And we never got a candied apple with red candy glaze. It was always a caramel. And I remember thinking, like, my mother's never gonna let me eat this. This is like, don't these parents know that all these caramel apples that they're handing out for trick-or-treat, and a decent parent won't allow them to have it because of needles or razors in the apple. And the other one was raisins, box of raisins. Couldn't understand how they thought raisins were fun to give to a trick-or-treater. And the other thing was the popcorn balls. It's like another no-brainer. Like, no cautious parent is going to let their kid. This is how it was for us back in the 60s. like needles or razor blades were going to be in certain items. And trick or treater beware. But the one thing I will say is I can remember at Halloween time, we lived in a tract home that had maybe 10 or 12 streets that made up that little area of the tract homes. But we would only go to the streets close by us, which was our street and 2 streets over max, and then the side street. We would come home with so much candy. It was a really heavy trick-or-treat bag when we got home, and tons of stuff. And the one thing when I was a grown-up, and I thought of this myself, as I was inspecting my kids' trick-or-treat bag, what could they eat, what could they not eat, was like how very easily, if someone really wanted to spike a candy, how they could push a needle through a candy wrapper and stick a needle inside a chocolate candy bar or any, candy bar like that. And you never know, because you wouldn't know that a tiny little needle was pushed through the wrapper. And I got so frazzled at times. I wouldn't let my kids see me kind of go through their candy. But then it seemed when our kids were born in the 80s, there were like joint Halloween events. I guess you could still go trick-or-treating door to door, but it never like it was in the 60s and 70s, because that's all there was. I don't remember they had any like joint events or activities sponsored by different places. So now it's a combination of that, or in the 80s when my kids went. Now I have no clue. All I know is that last year, well, definitely I think the year before they canceled Halloween, that was crazy. And then I didn't even really pay that much attention last year to Halloween. And I don't know what's happening this year to Halloween, but I just know my Halloween, the most fun I have at Halloween now is just here with you guys on my videos, and then with making up little Halloween bags for the neighbor kids and my little kids in the family. And but they get like a party bag, like a Halloween trick-or-treat party bag full of different things. And but the tradition, I used to think, like, are people really making all this, like how you would make food for Thanksgiving or Christmas? As a kid, when I'd see these families that gave out the candied apples and the popcorn, think, is this the same family that gave us this last year? Do they do this every year? And I'm really excited about it, because it's not exciting for me as a kid. And then were your Halloween traditions when you were too... Oh, well, then it turned around. It says, what were your traditions when you were too old to go trick-or-treating? So then I was staying home. I can kind of really remember that, because I have a younger sister, like 10 years younger than myself, or 13, or I forget how much younger than she is. I think she's 13 years younger. But anyways, Dad would... He'd go out trick-or-treat with my younger sister, the youngest, and the other siblings. And then Mom would be relaxing at home, and I'd be at the door actually physically handing out the candy. So that kind of changed. That was fun. But then the one, I don't think my dad could not handle the fact that I had now turned 16 and I was now working on Christmas, on Halloween night. And I guess it was really devastating for my dad because he knew how much fun I had at Halloween. And he had fun too. We all had fun as a family, but he really thought I was missing out. And I've told this story before. And I was working at this little greasy spoon joint at the foot of the Santa Susana Pass Road. And I was working there at night, and he was going to scare me. And his plan was he drove over to my car, and he got in the back seat of the car. It was his car, actually, so he had keys to everything. And he laid down on the floor of the back seat. And when I got in the car, he was going to pop up from the back and scare me. But what happened was, because it was late at night and it was Halloween, the boss and his wife walked me out. Everybody was closing up shop, and we were all leaving at the same time. And my dad was really nervous because this guy was a real cowboy type, and my dad knew he had guns either in his vehicle or both in the vehicle and in the shop. And he didn't move. He was really afraid with them there. So he decided he was going to wait till I got home and then pop up from the back seat and say, "Boo." But I heard as I was driving home, and only like my house was not even a mile from where I worked. It was just up one road, down another road, and then that was our street. And he had on like a windbreaker black overcoat, like windbreaker material, and I heard it rubbing together. And I turned around and I looked over my right shoulder, and here was this face with earmuffs and a hat pulled down low over his forehead with earmuffs, and his collar's pulled up. And he realized, oh, she caught me, that if I'm gonna have a spooky Halloween trick on her now, I better do it now or I'm not gonna be able to do it. So he plays the part and he says, pull over, pull over. You guys, I was a wet noodle. And I just, like, my whole body went limp. And I, out of response, I said, Dad, I started calling Dad. And he thought, because I was calling for my dad, he thought I knew that it was him. So that's why he kind of played the part. But I didn't know it was him. I was just like, even though I was 16, I was just like terrified. I was still calling for my dad for help. I went like limp like this, and I was getting ready to take the turn onto the next street, but I didn't completely. It was like a half a turn. And we just rolled. We went up the curb, up the embankment on the corner house, and up their front lawn, into their front lawn. I just sat there. I was so scared, and my dad, of course, was scared too. I'm just grateful to the keeper of the stars that we didn't hit any trick-or-treaters, or no harm, no foul. I was so grateful for that after. So my dad gets out from the back. He tries to push me over. I couldn't move. He kept saying, Angela, move over. It's me, Dad. I couldn't move. Like, even though I could hear, I couldn't function. So we drive home. It takes like a minute to get home. And we're getting out of the car. And I can hear my dad chuckling under his breath, like, hey, are you okay? And he was kind of laughing. And I was crying and halfway laughing. And when we got in the house, my mom's sitting there on the couch. She was like, what happened? She sees my face is all bloated and crying and red. And my dad's face is red from laughing. And she sees my dad laughing, and I'm crying and halfway laughing. And then we broke out in such hysterics. And my mom's sitting there trying to figure out, well, what happened? Was it good? Was it bad? And we were trying to tell her, and we just broke out hysterically laughing. And so it was a good, happy ending to what was like a terrible, horror moment for me. But my mom was really upset at my dad. And she kept saying, this could have happened. You could have done this. He could have shot you. Because he did go to shooting ranges and he did have guns. My dad said, I know. That's the whole reason I didn't do our Halloween fright night as planned, because he walked her out. He and his wife walked her out to the car, and I didn't dare poke my head out then. So anyways, that was my initiation to Halloween as an adult, because that was pretty much like my first Halloween. I didn't participate at all. I didn't obviously go out for trick-or-treat. I didn't stay home and do candy. I was out working. My dad was just couldn't handle it. Anyways, I've told the story before, and I can always relive it as if it happened yesterday. And we had an old, my dad, we had 4 or 5 cars, but we had an uncle who was a mechanic over in Bell Gardens, and when an older good car would come in, my dad would say, I want to buy it from you for the kids, because I don't want the kids driving brand new hot rod cars. I want them driving the older cars that don't have a fast acceleration, but they're big and well built in case they get in a fender bender. And so the car I was driving at the time was a Ford Falcon station wagon. It was a 60. I think he may have said it was a 65 Ford Falcon station wagon. It was white. I think it was an earlier model. And when you would floor that thing, it would only go like to 30 to 40 super slow. There was no such thing as flooring that. But I didn't know any different. I was just so happy, because in comparison to any of my other friends, nobody else had a car. Their families either had 1 or 2 cars for mom or dad, and so even though they were able to drive their parents' car, which was a nicer car, I still felt more privileged, because my parents gave us our own car, even though like no other kid in the world would be caught driving that. I thought it was really something. So do you have a especially memorable Halloween to tell us about? That was at age 16, and that started after I was too old for trick-or-treat. I think it was like the year or 2 after I was a hippie. I remember I dressed up as a hippie. It was one of my first homemade costumes, and I had a pair of bell-bottom pants that were kind of like floral printed, dark colored floral printed, and a belt, and somehow I had a vest on. I think I ended up with a vest because one of the art projects at our school at the time was crocheting vests. So I had like bell-bottom pants, like a floral print, but they were dark colors, like dark green, dark purple, and dark blue, with a vest. I think it was a crocheted vest and a long sleeve shirt tucked in with a belt. I've got the picture somewhere. And then the best part I thought was the finishing touch was I wrapped some material around my head like a bandana. But it seems like I grew up to that Halloween costume, and that was one of the years I was handing out candy. And then I can't remember anything after that, so I think that was like my last costume. Were you one of the families that gave out raisins or pennies or candied apples or popcorn ball? It's kind of funny. Ghost stories or experience with... Oh, well, I've told you this before. Hot summer nights, we'd all play outside till like what seemed like midnight. Whenever I had to go to school, we'd get... That was back when you had 3 months off for summer. You were out the first week of June, and you didn't go back till after Labor Day. Good times. And we would play Ouija board in our garage. Oh my goodness. And that we'd ask a question in the dark, and there'd be one little bit of light, so you could barely see. I thought Ouija board was real. So there's that. And we had the best neighbors across the street, and we could really scare them, and they would scare us. And we'd have the best, we just had the best summer spooky nights with that Ouija board. And they also had a doll that they claimed would bleed. And they said, oh, my brother poked a needle in his eye and it's bleeding. And they'd bring us upstairs. Oh no, they didn't have the 2-story house back then. Back then it was still the 1-story. And they would bring us in the room. And the room would be dark and the doll would be sitting in the corner. And they'd scare, I'd be scared but not really, thinking dolls can't bleed. And as you would get closer to look at it, they would say, no, don't get too close. And they would scream bloody murder. Oh my goodness, the good times. What you thought was a ghost, yeah. So, but the doll always scared me. And they'd show us, they had a safety pin, and they said the brother every once in a while steals their doll and pokes it in the eye, in the corner of its eye, and it bleeds real blood. Terrible. Haunted house. Not a real haunted house, just the haunted house at Disneyland was always a fun thing. And then in high school, a few times I went with a friend of mine. Her name was Mary Beth. And she'd always get freaked out because at the end of the Haunted Mansion tour, the Disneyland, the Los Angeles Disneyland, I don't know if they used the same audio for the one over in Orlando, but at the end of the haunted house tour, and you're spooky already, they would say, welcome back. And my friend, Mary Beth, always thought the ghost voice was saying, Mary Beth. And it wasn't until a time or two that we went together, and she was so freaked out by it, and she figured out it wasn't saying Mary Beth, it was saying welcome back. But I guess that would be freaky if that's your name and you think you're leaving the haunted mansion and they're calling out your name. So that's that. Anyways, I remember being a Casper the Ghost as a young child. Back then, we lived in Simi Valley, the far east end, which was, they only had like one main street, Tapo, and a thrifty drugstore. No Walmart, no Kmart, no big department store. But when it was time for Halloween costumes, the only place back then was thrifty drugstore, and there'd be rack of costumes hanging like on clothes hangers, and you could go through it, and it would have the plastic mask with a stretch rubber band to put around your head, and a silky one-size-fits-all costume. And the masks were so hot, and the costumes never fit. And my mom always made us wear clothes under, because it would be laid. Sometimes she would make us wear our pajamas underneath. But I was the oldest, but I always felt my costume looked better. I was able to fix my clothing underneath so you really couldn't see it, but my brother and sister were younger, and you could always see their clothing underneath. But it was still cute though. We still had